Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome. We got to pop up and do this thing right. Welcome to our April 13, 2015 edition of Nightcast. We're trying something new tonight. It's our second night of trying this live on Nightcast, and it's taking us a while to get used to this. We're trying a feature that lets us stream live on YouTube at the same time we do our regular live stream on our normal channel. And there are a few buttons and things to figure out, but we're working on it. Thanks for joining us. The opening story tonight, friends, thousands of Russians have been displaced and several killed as severe wildfires rage in Siberia.
What we know now is that there's a state of emergency declared in several Russian regions because of wildfires. The worst case or the worst situation earlier today was in the region you mentioned, Khakassia. But we now know that further east in Siberia, there are also wildfires raging. Again, in that region, another 3 people have now been declared dead in those fires, including a child. We know that people there are being evacuated from their homes and that firefighters are battling the flames there. Earlier today, we heard about flames rising up to at least 5 meters high. We knew many people were being evacuated, people trying to evacuate themselves from their homes, hundreds of houses destroyed, 16 people now confirmed dead in southern Siberia, and many animals as well, cattle, sheep, also destroyed, and huge amounts of farming land as well that's been burned in these huge fires.
And Sarah, what of the 5,000 or so that we're hearing that have been displaced? They are currently homeless. What are authorities doing with them at the moment?
Well, I'm sure they'll be doing everything they possibly can, because we've seen on Russian state television today a whole series of live coverage of meetings by officials from the Emergencies Ministry, also from the Health Ministry, meeting and showing that they are taking a very active, proactive role in trying to stop these fires spreading any further, and certainly dealing with the consequences, the fallout of those fires. The medical side of things, we're told, is covered. The Health Ministry is in charge there. We know that hundreds of people sought medical help and that some 77 were hospitalized. Some of them, we know, are in a serious condition still.
Okay, friends, we're going to come on out of that there. The BBC's Sarah Ransford, in that report in Moscow, reported that fires have spread further east, causing widespread damage. Friends, our next story, we go to a story affecting some of the negotiations that the United States has been attempting to make with Iran. Russia lifts ban on S-300 missile system delivery to Iran. The caption with this opening photograph in this story reads, "The system will enhance Iran's ability to defend against air attacks." Russia has lifted a ban on supplying Iran with a sophisticated air defense missile system, the Kremlin has said. Delivery of the S-300s was canceled in 2010 after the UN imposed sanctions on Iran over the nuclear program. But the Russian president gave the go-ahead after Tehran struck an interim deal with world powers to curb nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. The U.S. and Israel have criticized the news. The $800 million, the equivalent of 545 million pounds, contract to deliver the system was heavily criticized at the time by Israel and the U.S., who feared it could be used to protect Iranian nuclear sites from airstrikes. When it was canceled, Iran filed a lawsuit seeking billions of dollars in damages. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Sergei Lavrov said in a statement that the sale was put on hold entirely voluntarily to aid the talks on Iran's nuclear program. And the caption with this photograph with the story, friends, reads, "The missiles can shoot down jets and other missiles." And then the next photograph that immediately follows in the story, the caption on this one reads, "Russia signed a multi-million-dollar contract to deliver an S-300 system in 2007. And of course, I mentioned that in my notes to you a moment ago. The Russian Defense Ministry said it was now ready to supply the S-300 equipment, quote unquote, promptly. An official there said, quoted by Interfax. Iran hailed the decision as a step towards, quote, establishing stability and security in the region. The country's defense minister, Hossein Degan, was quoted as saying by state media, Israel, a vocal opponent of the nuclear deal, condemned the news. Quote, "This is a direct result of the legitimacy that Iran obtained from the emerging nuclear deal," said Intelligence Minister Yuval Steinitz. He said it was, quote, proof Iran planned to use relief from sanctions for arms rather than the welfare of Iranian people. But Mr. Lavrov said the missiles were, quote, entirely defensive and were of no security threat to any country, including Israel. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry had raised concerns with Mr. Lavrov about the announcement. White House spokesman Josh Earnest said without elaborating. And the photograph with this next, the caption with this next photograph part of this story reads, Russia was among the global powers who secured an interim deal on Iran's nuclear program. Of course, it sounds like Russia, in this story, it sounds like Russia had a financial interest in securing an interim deal on Iran's nuclear program. You know, and just a reminder, friends, if you're tuning in for the first time tonight to this program, there have been many times I've played the former Secretary of State George P. Shultz comments and statement that he made just a few days after the Geneva talks began in 2013 when he was interviewed by the BBC. He said, Iran is a great rug merchant. He says they will smile at you, send you on your way, and cut your throat. Mr. Shultz dealt with Iran from 1982 to 1989 as Secretary of State, I believe under Ronald Reagan then, and he knows them. He says they cannot be trusted. A former advisor to a former president in Iran got on television live in Syria, on Syrian news television, on December 11, 2013, just a couple of weeks after George P. Shultz gave an interview to the BBC. And on that live Syrian news television program, the advisor to a former Iranian president said, we tricked them. Talking about we tricked the P5+1. The people you see here who were part of the Geneva talks in November of 2013. We tricked them, and he says we've really got uranium underground at a higher percentage we haven't told them about that we're continuing to work on, and objective is a bomb, and then we'll deal as equals with the others as one who has a bomb. And he said the uranium we told them about that we said, sure, we'll reduce that by 20%. We told them where it was. We told them the truth about where it was, percentage-wise. And yeah, we'll lower that 20%. But we've got other uranium already at a much higher percent underground. And we hadn't told him about that. And he's laughing about how they plan to defeat not only Israel, but the United States as well, and some of the others players involved. Iran is on a war program. The caption with this next photograph, part of this story, says the deal aims to prevent Iran developing a nuclear bomb, although Iran insists its program is peaceful. Yeah, as former Secretary of State for the United States, George P. Shultz, said that they're great rug merchants. Oh, this is the greatest rug in the whole world. Yeah, buy it, buy it. They'll smile at you, send you on your way, and cut your throat. The S-300 is a surface-to-air missile system that can be used against multiple targets, including jets, or to shoot down other missiles. It's not clear when the system would be delivered. Russia has stopped producing the model specified under the original contract and has instead offered an upgrade. Russia was one of the 6 major players or world powers to reach an outline agreement with Iran over its nuclear program. The sides have set a June 30 deadline to reach a comprehensive deal. Tough negotiations lie ahead, in particular on how and when to lift sanctions. Meanwhile, Mr. Kerry is due to brief Congress as the Obama administration attempts to persuade opponents not to block the deal's implementation. With what's going on, they ought to really reverse gears on this deal. He said they should hold their fire until they see a final agreement. Yeah, in the meantime, all these other missile launcher things and all are going to be inside Iran. And that stuff they've got hidden underground that their advisor to a former president openly told about on Syrian news television in December 2013. A video I've played on Nightcast here several times. It's in our archive, too, friends, where you can see it. It's the advisor to the former president is speaking in the Arabian language, but we've got English subtitles at the bottom telling you exactly what he's saying. And we're telling you in the English language exactly what he's saying in that interview. Scary. And it's amazing that the NSA, with all of its observation things, that it and the president and the current administrations acts like it hasn't heard this advisor to the former president. Or if they have, why in the world are they ignoring his words about how they've tricked all the world powers and what their real plans are as he divulged them in that Syrian news television program? Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has cautioned against seeing the interim agreement as a guarantee of a final deal. How about that one? So, hey guys, you're playing with a dangerous enemy here. Next story, friends, relates to this same thing. There may be a little bit of overlap in this next story from today. The caption with the photograph on this story reads, Russian officials say, let me give you a caption. Let me give you a lead-in on this story before I read this caption on this photograph. U.S. complains over Russian intercept of reconnaissance plane. And the caption on this opening photograph reads, Russian officials say the U.S. plane was heading for the Russian border. U.S. officials say they will file an official complaint about Russia's intercept of a U.S. reconnaissance plane. The incident occurred over the Baltic Sea on April 7, just 6 days ago, according to the United States. European Command, which called the intercept, let me tell you that again. Read that sentence again, Ed. This incident occurred over the Baltic Sea on April 7, according to the United States European Command, which called the intercept, quote, unsafe and, quote, unprofessional. U.S. officials say the plane was in the international airspace at the time. The Russian Defense Ministry denied any wrongdoing on the part of its pilots, according to Russian media reports. Russian Major General Igor Konashenkov said the U.S. plane had been, quote, steadily moving towards the Russian state border, according to the Interfax news agency. A Russian jet was scrambled, which approached the unidentified aircraft and flew by it several times, after which it changed course. Major General Konashenkov reported this. U.S. officials say the fighter intercepted the U.S. aircraft at a high rate of speed from the rear and then proceeded to conduct 2 more passes using unsafe and unprofessional maneuvers in close proximity. Russia has been accused of border violations several times by the Baltic neighbors in recent months. Baltic states have expressed concern at increasingly frequent snap Russian military drills in the region amid tensions over the crisis in Ukraine. And then, friends, I've got more on this. This is the story I meant to tell you. There may be some overlapping in this one. The lead-in on this reads, U.S. concern as Russia lifts ban on Iran delivery. The caption with this opening photograph reads, Russia struck a multi-million-dollar deal to supply the S-300 system to Iran in 2007. Now, like I said, this news story, friend, may have some overlapping with the former news story related to this, but there are some different factors in this one. I'm just going to read this story that just came in on this to you. No video yet, just photographs. The U.S. has expressed concern after Russia lifted a ban on supplying Iran with the sophisticated S-300 air defense missile system. Secretary of State John Kerry raised the matter in a phone call with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the White House said. Russia said the embargo was no longer necessary after an interim deal was reached on Iran's nuclear program. Tehran and 6 world powers aim to reach a final deal by June 30. See, I told you there'd probably be some overlapping in this report. White House spokesman Josh Earnest did not give details of Mr. Kerry's phone call, but said coordination and unity with nations like Russia had been key to reaching agreement with Iran. And the caption with this next photograph, part of this story, reads, the missiles can shoot down jets and other missiles. Different photograph, but that point was made in the earlier story. A Pentagon spokesman called the move unhelpful, saying concerns were being raised through the, quote, appropriate diplomatic channels. That language kind of sounds like things that are politically correct, which sometimes make you want to just about vomit, does it not, friends? Russia agreed to sell the S-300 system in 2007, but blocked delivery in 2010 after the UN imposed sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program. Interesting, the UN It's, this story is pointing out it was the UN that imposed sanctions on Iran, and here these six powers have gotten together, mostly initiated and pushed and promoted by the United States. The United States having been doing some private negotiations with Iran with a person from the United States who was born in Iran, physically sent to Iran and working on this deal behind the scenes for a year before the Geneva talks in November of 2013. But back to the rest of this story. The S-300 is a surface-to-air missile system that can be used against multiple targets, including jets, or to shoot down other missiles. Tehran welcomed the move as a step towards, quote, establishing stability in the region. I'm sorry, I left out part of that. Establishing stability and security in the region. Yeah, security for Iran, so they can go ahead with their attempts to make a nuclear bomb and have these missiles to help prevent Israel, or if the United States should later want to help Israel bomb some of the nuclear plants in Iran. Good luck once Russia's delivered this S-300 missile system that can shoot down missiles and aircraft and what have you. All right, there's more to this story, friends. Israel, a vocal critic of the nuclear deal, has voiced dismay. Yeah, for good reason. Unbelievable what's happening right before our noses on all this. Those of you that understand prophecy, you understand, okay, you can see the God of this world working behind the scenes and putting people in office that are allowing this to go on under their nose, even helping the situation for it to go on under the influence of the God of this world, who our Father and Jesus Christ have left on the throne until time for Christ to return. And a lot's going to have to happen before they return. There are, God will allow the countries who are disobeying him to suffer the things he talks about in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, the blessing and cursing chapters. He says that we, friends, both as individuals and collectively as various nations, especially those who are the modern-day descendants of the tribes of Israel, God tells us, if you obey me, I'll make you the head, not the tail, the lender, not the borrower. 5 of you will chase 100, 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. Read the promises, the blessings that God proffers in those 2 blessing and cursing chapters, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. Now, that's in the first half of the chapter, and one of those promises includes rain in due season, telling us that God is in control of the weather, the rain, and rain in due season means no droughts, because you'll have rain when you should have rain. No droughts. No flooding, because you won't have excess rain when you shouldn't be having excess rain. You'll have the proper amount of rain in due season. And God has the ability to control and oversee that. And as a blessing, he'll make sure no drought, no flooding. However, when you see drought and flooding, then you know, hey, we as a nation, when you see drought and flooding in a given nation, you can see that, hey, our nation is under a curse, as announced by God in Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. We're not getting rain in due season. We're getting adverse weather. And therefore, instead of the blessing of rain in due season, we're getting the cursing for a people, individually and collectively as a nation, who are not obeying God. As he says, if you diligently hearken to the voice of the Eternal and obey my commands, my statutes, my judgments, then all these blessings that he enumerates in the first half of each of those two chapters, of those two blessing and cursing chapters, in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. The latter half of those same two chapters, the blessing and cursing chapters, the latter half, God starts out by saying, if you don't obey me, then just the opposite of these blessings. You'll be the tail, not the head. You'll be the borrower, not the lender. Your enemy will chase you, and I'll continue to increase your curses 7 times. And if you still don't obey me, then, as God says in verse 19 of Leviticus 26, I'll break the pride of your power. And we can see that beginning to happen in the United States. This news story I was reading to you, friends, about this last story about the U.S. concern. There's a quote here that says, "This is a direct result of the legitimacy that Iran obtained from the emerging nuclear deal," said Intelligence Minister Yuval Steinitz. And then the caption with this photograph, part of this story, friends, reads, "The system will enhance Israel's ability," not Israel, "the system will enhance Iran's ability to defend against air attacks." And of course, that would mean to defend against air attacks most likely from Israel, or with some potential or possible involvement on part of the United States, at least in the past, or maybe perhaps under a different administration, except that there's a prophecy in Isaiah 9, verse 21. You should take a look at that. I don't have a slide to put up for you, but I'm just going to read that real quickly to you, friends, and then we'll go right back to finish up this story and then close up for tonight. Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 21. Isaiah just before book of Jeremiah, and a prophecy for the latter days. Through Isaiah, God says, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh. Now, to understand this, of course, you've got to understand who Manasseh and Ephraim are, and I'm going to put a slide up on the screen for just a moment that tells you who are the modern-day descendants of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. His 12 sons. This slide shows you where the descendants of his 12 sons are today, according to what God gave us in Genesis 49 through Jacob, explaining where his sons would be in the latter days, which are these days when knowledge has been increased, and people go, and transportation has become rapid, people going to and fro. The two conditions God set out through Daniel to tell us when the last days would be. Knowledge would be vastly increased, and people would be able to go to and fro like never before, like you can only do on jet aircraft and modern-day cars, even to and fro within a country. But here's where the 12 tribes are today. You'll see that Ephraim is the modern-day descendants of Ephraim are the descendants who live in the United Kingdom. The modern-day descendants of Manasseh are those of the United States. The rest of this, and so when you understand who those are, you'll understand this verse in Isaiah 9, verse 21 of Isaiah 9, which says, Manasseh, Ephraim, United States, United Kingdom, and Ephraim, Manasseh, United Kingdom, United States. Some emphasis there. Now, that also poetically means, even though the United States and the UK may have their tits and tats and the spars between one another, they together, the rest of this verse says, they together shall be against Judah. And the rest of the verse says, for all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. But in these latter days, we're going to see the United States and the United Kingdom turn against their brother Judah, Judah being the tribe of Jacob that's largely, even though scattered around the world, it's largely in the Middle East, as where Judah is collectively located today. Back to this story. Mr. Lavrov, finish up the story on this. Mr. Lavrov of Russia said the S-300 is exclusively a defensive weapon, which, according to him, cannot serve offensive purposes and will not jeopardize the security of any country, including, of course, Israel, end quote. Yeah, right. Tell us another one. Prince, can you believe Russia? Missiles of a technical technology that, they can rewire that stuff. It's not clear when the systems will be delivered. Russia has stopped producing the model since under the original contract. I mentioned to you earlier, this story is very similar to the other one. And instead, they've offered an upgrade. The deal on Iran's nuclear program aims to restrict its ability to make nuclear weapons. Well, they don't need to make any nuclear weapons. You're delivering them all these missiles. But they, like the advisor to the former president said, we're still working on stuff we hadn't told you about that's at a much higher percentage. Underground, in the hidden plants, you don't have a clue as to where they are. They did this deal, though, in exchange for sanctions relief. It's due to be finalized by the end of June 30, a June 30 deadline this time. You'd seen all the former deadlines that have been missed and broken. They're great rug merchants. And sticking points remain, in particular, on how and when to lift sanctions. Mr. Kerry, meanwhile, has been holding closed-door briefings with the U.S. Congress as he seeks to win over skeptical lawmakers who have threatened to block the deal. Friends, I do have a couple more stories. This next one relates to India, something India's prime minister is doing in Germany, promoting trade agreements between the two countries. He has been guest of honor at an international industrial trade fair in Hanover, where more than 400 Indian companies are hoping to strike deals with German firms. Damian McGuinness has a report for us.
It's been described as a matchmaking event between German and Indian companies, but the aim is long-lasting marriage rather than speed dating. Mrs. Merkel wants German exporters to get access to India's huge market, while Mr. Modi is keen to attract German manufacturers. But to do that, he needs to allay German fears that India is bureaucratic and inefficient, and so has announced that the tax system will be made simpler and more transparent.
We have taken sweeping steps to reform our policies and open up more to foreign direct investments in key areas like insurance, construction, defense, and railway.
Chancellor Merkel is also taking India's overtures seriously, meeting Mr. Modi on each of the 3 days of his visit. German business leaders see India, with its strong economic growth and young population, as Asia's last major untapped market, which is why the Chancellor wants to get talks on an EU-Indian free trade regime back on track.
We mustn't isolate ourselves from competition. We should remain open. This is what I pointed out to our partner India, and we would be very happy to resume trade negotiations, which are at an advanced stage. But this I say also with regard to free trade with the United States, Canada, and other important countries.
Whether or not progress is made on free trade between the EU and India, business leaders in Hanover are optimistic. The last time India was the partner country at this trade fair in 2006, more than $1 billion worth of business deals were struck. Damien McGuinness, BBC News, Berlin.
And friends, I'm going to, while we're on Berlin and Germany and all that, I want to move ahead to a story that's related regarding a German woman. I'm going to push this next story I was going to do regarding the Nigerian schoolgirls who were captured. I'm going to push that ahead to possibly tomorrow night because this story relates, and this one may be of a lot of interest to some of my friends, people I know who maybe either have never married and gotten to an age where, hey, maybe there's now an opportunity for you to marry and you still like to marry and you'd still like to have children. Maybe some of you have already married but never have children and now you're older. Well, I encourage you to remember Abraham and his wife Sarah, who at the elder age of, I believe Abraham was 100 and his wife 10 years younger, age 90, was she not, when she bore Isaac. So, and you know, that was and that's not the only time that the Bible makes quotes as having opened the womb of a woman who was closed in the case of Sarah after she was up in her years, after the normal age for childbearing passes for a woman, for the reason a lot of you understand already, you know. But God can do a miracle. And here's a woman from Germany, her name Annegret Ronig, who at the time of this picture was posing with her youngest daughter at age 55 then. Now, age 65, she's reportedly due to give birth to quadruplets. The German primary school teacher, let me bring her picture forward for you here. She's a primary school teacher in Germany. She's said to be in her 21st week of pregnancy and feeling fit, quote unquote. If her pregnancy progresses well as hoped, Miss Ronig will be the oldest to give birth to quadruplets, but not the oldest mum to give birth to a child. That official record is held by Maria del Carmen Busada Lara, who gave birth to twins in Spain in 2006 at the age of, now listen, I'm reading this to you from a news story, at the age of 66. Hey, fellas, you need to, you news people, writers, you need to go to the Bible, where you'll find the wife of Abraham, Sarah, who had a child at the age of 90. Now, the news story does go on and say that there's another woman who had a child at the age of 70, her name Omkari Penwar, when she gave birth to twins in India in 2008. All right, friends, I thought that would end on a light story for us tonight and be of interest to some of you, maybe especially to some of my friends in Texas, who I plan to send this program. They don't have internet, but I'm going to send you a copy of this program there in Hawkins, Texas. All right, you two ladies, I think you'll find that interesting. Friends, that's it for this Monday night report here on Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbert, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbert. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.